Welcome back here to the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. We've started another one here. We had 300 and something. I've lost count, even though it's right there in the title what number it is, but I don't know what number it is when we hit record here. So super excited for you to join us here for another amazing individual who chooses to be a track and field coach. And I think we're gonna have a lot of fun with this one. We had a lot of laughs in our pre-interview, so I'm super excited about this one. So let's get right into it. Help me welcome from the great Minnesota State University, the wise, the wonderful Mr. Brian Sebera. I was gonna try the
Another
real
one.
print. Yeah. And then I was like,
Yeah.
let's just go what I
Go.
know. Sebera. Brian, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm so good. Yes, I'm excited for this opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, so ready to go. Ready to
Awesome.
fire away and give you
Uh,
whatever I know.
Well, I know you're ready to go because halfway through our pre-interview, you started going into the story, and I was like, wait, that gold needs to be on wax. We got to record that, man. Hold on. So I love it, man. How are things going at Minnesota State? I think you're the third coach for Minnesota State. Like we've almost got the whole staff on here, and you guys do just a wonderful job there. How's life there? And you're in Mankato, is that right?
Oh, yep,
Yeah.
yep,
How's life
yep.
in Mankato, man?
So very good. Really enjoying the time here. Been here for going into year seven,
Oh
uh,
wow.
and working for Coach Turgeon, who I've known for about
Yeah.
16 years.
Oh really?
And his amazing ability just to kind of again keep us motivated and keep
Yeah.
us at task is kind of been what I've gravitated to quite a bit. But it's been an amazing experience. Coach Parno, Coach Held, Coach Blue, all their experiences, really again learning from one another, that big circle, and then just the support, from
Yeah.
whether it's the department to the academic community to the community itself has been incredible. So.
That's
Uh,
cool.
yeah, this has probably been the most enjoyable stop along my
Yeah.
path here. Yeah.
I love hearing that. It's one thing to have a track and field program, and of course, I um, encourage all universities and high schools and such to have a track and field program because it's so much bigger than just jumping and running and things like that. Like it's overall good for your athletic department and it's overall good for your school. But if you're going to have a track and field program, I want you to support it. So I love hearing of the support, not just from your staff, Coach Turgeon being a Gill podcast alum, Coach Parno being a Gill podcast alum. So I love that you have that support with the staff, but to hear like, oh, the university, the athletic department, like we get support. That's again, if you're going to have a track and field program, support it and
Yep.
you'll have so many more good things. So that's cool, man. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing how you got to Minnesota State, and you said you've known Coach Durgeon for 16 years. That's going to be interesting because
Yeah.
you've only been at Minnesota State for 6. So before we get there, I feel like I got to hold you, but you're just like, I love it,
Oh,
man. I
yeah.
love it. Your energy is infectious here. Let's get into our Wayback Machine here and find out more about you, Brian. Assuming you were an athlete, and that's not a great assumption. We've had plenty of coaches that were not athletes that turn into great track and field coaches. Where does track and field start for you?
So my gosh, my experience with track and field, my opportunity with track and field really started so many years ago, and I was probably only 7 or 8. But living in a small country, Lesotho, within the country of South Africa, so
Mm.
it's just within there. And I remember vividly because I remember I tell my kids, even my parents, I remember having all the students come out. They had all the students come out. They put us against the fence, and we had to run. I don't know if it was 100 or 80 yards, whatever it was, and then they kind of picked the students that are the fastest. And so I remember having that experience, and I remember being pulled aside as one of the fastest, and then kind of going, man, like this is fun. This is something I can do. And again, nothing really came of it from there. You just kind of ran it. You ran in whatever little games and track meets that they kind of put on. And then nothing came of it until I got to Toronto, Canada, and then really dove in on a club standpoint.
So the name of the country again, Lesotho.
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 Yeah.
Uh, what year? How old were you when you left Lesotho?
So just what was I? Maybe 7, 8.
So, as much as you can remember, that's a fairly young age, so you
Yeah.
have all excuses to not remember much. What was the culture of track and field in Lesotho? And what I mean by that is like at that age, like, did you guys know about like, oh, I don't know what year it is, but I'm just going to make up famous names like, oh, Michael Johnson, Carl Lewis, and
Yeah.
things like,
No,
or yeah.
it wasn't like that. It was
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
so, and I would say it was even more like physical education.
Mm,
Your
hmm.
physical education course, and then they have all the students, and they have, whatever their games for the year, that kind
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah, yeah. Like a field day type of thing.
Kind of
Hmm,
thing.
hmm.
And then you just go out there and you're lined up with all these kids
Yeah,
from different classes, different, and they're your age mates, but you don't know them. And then you run, and then they kind of pick out, oh, this kid's this
yeah.
kid's
So,
this fast. Yeah,
so you guys didn't really know much or think, and I should say more think much, not know much, think
yeah,
much about like the Olympics and things like you guys were at this age and stage as much as you can remember. It was like, oh man, we just like to run from light pole
yeah,
to light pole.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
So you moved from Lesotho to Canada.
Yeah, yeah. So initially we ended up in Lesotho because we were escaping genocide. So my dad's from Rwanda, and at the time his country was going through genocide, and we had applied for citizenship in the States. We did not get citizenship in the States. So then at that point we had to think of other things, and we were living in Kenya at the time. I was born in Uganda, but we were living in Kenya at the time. And so the furthest we could get away from Rwanda and some of the things that were happening was Lesotho. So we ended up in South Africa until we could figure out things. And then what ended up happening at that point was we had received citizenship in Canada. And in January or February or sometime when it was cold and freezing, we flew to Canada, landed in Canada, and there it all began. My parents kind of got themselves situated and settled, and then obviously afforded me the opportunity to kind of be involved and do things. Yeah.
Now, I'm well aware that this is a track and field podcast. However, my curiosity just, I have a billion questions. You're about, excuse me, you're about 7 or 8 when you moved to Canada?
Yeah, about maybe a little bit older.
Yeah.
About there.
But still young. I mean,
Yeah.
not like a teenager or anything. You're young, you're a kid for sure,
Yeah.
right? We could, I mean, what I can't imagine. Like I'm just putting myself in your shoes, and as a little kid, you're moving here to there. Maybe at that age you didn't know everything that was going on. As parents, we sometimes protect our kids as far as what we tell them. Maybe why we're moving or why we're not moving. But you go from the continent of Africa, a lot of different countries in there, to Canada. And I love how the
Yeah.
first thing you said was in the middle of the cold. Like so,
Yeah.
there's a stark difference in weather,
Yeah.
language. Are you? Forgive me if this is a insensitive question. Are you speaking English at this age?
At this age, I would say that I was a sponge. So at this age, it was just amalgamation of things. My parents were teachers, so my mother actually
Uh,
taught English. And living in Kenya, I started my primaries and started school in Kenya. And living in Kenya, you kind of went back and forth speaking Swahili and then speaking English. And so I had my home language from Uganda, I had Swahili that I picked up along the way. English I was learning and kind of picking up as I kind of moved and shifted. And then I picked up a Zulu language when I was in the continent of Lesotho. So I kind of picked up all these uh,
wow.
pieces because I was embedded in school. I was
Yeah,
embedded
yeah,
in
yeah.
the community. I was involved. And then I got to Canada, and it was, I was in ESL classes to, figure out English still because I obviously hadn't learned that formally. And so there was a lot of learning. But then again, I still remember some of the things vividly because I was, present. I was, going from one country to the next, moving, in the middle of the night and fleeing to, so those things are vivid. And even discussions that I have with my parents now about some of the things that, were taking place at the time. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yep, I ended up in Canada, and then there's kind of, again, like I said, we got settled. My mother went back to school, became a nurse. My father kind of he worked jobs to help assist my mother in doing that, and
Sure.
then eventually kind of went his way and did
Yeah,
what he
yeah.
to support us. And then during that time, it was then, track clubs and basketball and different things that we were just kind of thrown into. Yeah, keep us busy.
How I mean, I again just putting myself in your shoes, I would have been just terrified, just scared. I had a like thinking of just the language barrier first and foremost. I'm very privileged,
Yeah.
born and raised in America, so 99.9% of all my experiences are speaking English.
Yeah.
Even though I'm from Alabama, I still speak English well enough that people understand
Yeah.
me. I had a real like this altered my life in a positive manner to help me, empathize and see other sides of things. I was in Costa Rica
Mhm.
a few years ago. Actually, it might have been 2020 now that I think about it. And I found I was a college track coach for 10 years. I've been at Gill for 19, well, 1 year in between those, I was a professional poker player. So I still enjoy playing poker. So I found a local casino that had poker. Now, this was a local, this was not a tourist casino. This was a local. So I sit down with, 7, 8 other people, and they're all speaking Spanish. They're not speaking English at all. And I
Yeah.
remember just like, oh man, is this like when I'm in, I used to live in Vegas. When lived in Vegas, or now and someone who sits down from Asia or Africa or Mexico, and there's their native language is not English, so maybe they don't understand English all the way. Is this how they feel? Because I felt dumb, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Normal things that I would do easily, like, betting or asking, how much, or, asking a question, felt like the hardest thing in the world. And
Yeah.
it really, like, there's a little fear, not fear of like getting hurt, I guess. Probably a fear about like being stupid, like I'm going to say or do
Yeah.
something dumb,
Something that you,
but
yeah.
it really like made me think about like individuals that come to this country who don't speak English all that well. Like, oh my God, like how scared you must be. And that's not right. That's like, I have such a heart for that now.
Yeah. And I will say, and I think like you go through those things, and I think those things, if in most cases, made me a more understanding individual. I think the biggest thing for me was the experience that I had prior to that. I mean, I think living in Uganda, where you're living amongst you're living against Asian, you're living amongst
Mm,
Asians. Everyone's from everywhere, kind of in the area that we lived in Jinja there, living in Kenya, which again, another just very, very diverse area. For me, I think those experiences, if anything, taught me just how to live amongst other individuals.
mm,
And then as a result, I think, I mean, there's still like I call it identity crisis, where you're kind of battling with where do I want to fit in a group? How do I do this without essentially, tarnishing or leaving my, culture or that piece behind. And so I had those instances where whether it was like hip hop music, my friends like to listen to hip hop music. Should I listen to hip hop music? Because I want to fit in, I need to. Maybe the way I speak, and I even speak about it like this when I tell my wife. Me and my brother Felix, he was born in Kenya. Even my brother Agi, when we moved from certain places to other countries, I could notice that we could pick up whether it was vocal intonation or certain just phrases or how things are said.
mm.
Both my brothers moved to North Carolina, and I remember going there to visit them, and immediately they had like Southern draw. But a lot of it was just their ability to like acclimate to.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of what we experienced allowed us to kind of say, okay, you know what, when we're in certain situations, when I was in Canada and I needed to speak a certain way to fit into a certain group, I could do that.
Yeah.
When I moved to the States, I needed to make changes when everyone was saying, hey, you're saying A, you're from Canada. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I had no clue. It was one of those things where, you start making those just iterations and changes to fit in. So then you kind of have like what I call identity crisis, where you're just saying,
Yeah.
okay, just do what I need to fit in. And like you said, sometimes it's sad because I go like when I moved to Canada, I went to ESL classes. A lot of it was to get rid of just kind of shift my accent, you know,
Mm,
properly, if you want to say that.
right.
But then when I listen to my cousins or my uncles speaking now, and I'm going, gosh, that's a part of me that I wish I could share with my children,
Mhm.
because they look at me and they don't know any other part of me but who I am now. So yeah, I think there
Can't
was
imagine.
those fears. You're in front of a classroom and you're about to present something and you don't want to say it. You don't want to say it with an accent. You don't want to, yeah,
I had that experience as a 45-year-old
yeah,
adult, as a 10-year-old, 13-year, like, because you nailed it, when we're young and even when we're old, because it's actually kind of maybe coded in our DNA, back when, we were tuk-tuk and, running the caves. Well, if you didn't fit in, you died. You didn't eat,
yeah,
things like that, right? So that's still kind of ingrained with us that we want to fit in. And that's important today as 40 and 50-year-olds like me. But also more so in not today's society, in society, as a 13-year-old, 15-year-old, like we don't want to be the odd man out. We want to be part of a group. And so trying to find that identity, super hard, trying to find that identity when you don't understand slang and tonalities and accents. Like I just, boy, boy, you
yeah.
are, you and other people like yourself, brother. Way stronger than you get credit for on it, just for that. I mean, that is, like I said, that's Terrifying, 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 terrifying. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. That's interesting. It's part of your story, part of your journey. So I think it's important for us to share that. And I appreciate you being willing to share that with us. Okay, so I heard you're in Canada. You're a teenager, so we're in high school. It's Canada, so grade 9, grade 10, or whatever they say up there. Speaking of regional decisions and how you speak, and you're doing. How did you get into track? Because I heard you say running and track and things like that. How did
I
track
would
get into it?
say- So basically, I think when I got to Canada, and then the one thing that I found myself just identifying and being able to like settle in and just basically appropriate myself with culture and everything else was sport. So anything to do with sport, I realized I was just extremely talented and I can just pick it up and do it, whether it was
Oh,
my friends were going to play hockey. Okay, let me figure out
hockey.
how
I
to
didn't even
skate
think
and
about that.
do this thing, right? Basketball, whatever it might be. So then I was just kind of all over the place and doing so many different things. And then a friend of mine at one point was just like, like, why don't you try this track and field thing? And I went out and I mean, at the time, again, it was just like it was almost in South Africa, but it was just like, here's the broad jump, just stand here and jump as far as you can. And I out jumped everybody. And then it was kind of like, oh my gosh, this is something I should be doing. And so then from there, my mother, my brothers pointed me in the direction of certain clubs that they had in the area, but we kind of talked about it, and me and my brothers joined, and we joined Brampton Track Club just outside of Toronto, and loved our experience there. Obviously, then at that point we became track nerds, if you want to call it that.
So, did you graduate from Canadian high school?
Yep, yep. So finished all
So,
4 years.
so help us understand, because you mentioned a track club, and that's not foreign to us. Like we know track clubs, but my recollection is we don't really have track and field in the high schools like we do here in the States.
Yeah,
Maybe we have it at indoor. Maybe you're going to give us a little history here, but really, if you're doing track and field in Canada, you're doing it for a club,
yeah.
correct?
Yeah, so they did have track and field in the high school, but generally most students that wanted to do it and really be good at it, the club environment, club scene was probably the scene that they got involved in. So we met a man by the name of Frank Buca, who just retired this last year and coached Brampton Track Club forever, but was my coach and me and my brothers as well. And we signed up, my parents signed us up, and we were doing that basically throughout the year. And they had some indoor season things that they did into the outdoor season or summer months, sorry. Um, in the spring, we would still have our high school track, if you want to call it that, where we would compete with our high school team and go to track meets and whatnot. But then we would still have that club piece attached to it, yes.
So
So
it's not like the states where we are Mankato Tigers high
yeah.
school, and that's our identity. And then we may do track in the summer or basketball club or something.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
more club culture than high school
Yeah,
culture.
yeah, and I would say like now maybe things have changed quite a bit. Again, I'm old and not to date myself, but I think the culture has definitely changed quite a bit. I think there's still more done. There's probably more done now at the high school level with coaches, and obviously there's some different things in terms of how monies are appropriated to coaches there versus here in the States, and then even facilities and some of those things. So track clubs generally are the way to go out there,
Mhm.
and most athletes are affiliated with track clubs. And then again, if there's an opportunity in high school, you do it. Otherwise they kind of just leave that alone. And it's mainly that track club thing that's really kind of the big scene.
So you mentioned you were athletic. I love that you did ice hockey because I grew up in Alabama. Hockey wasn't even in my definition when I moved
Yeah.
from south to north. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. People play that because we,
Gosh.
we we didn't play that down south. That's a
Yeah.
whole different that was a whole different sport. Didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Athletic, doing hockey, other sports, things like that. What drew you to track? Like what made track the main sport? I'm hearing that it's the main sport. You may
Yeah.
correct me there, but what was it about track?
So I think as you mentioned it a little bit earlier, I think there was a certain point where me and my brothers were involved. We're doing it at the club level, we're doing it at the high school level, and then you're watching Olympics, you're watching some Diamond League things or things that are going on around the world, and Donovan Bailey was a big one for us, you know,
Yeah.
Johnson, some of the folks that came through at that time, and then you're watching those Linford Christie's, the um I'm just trying to think of athletes from the
Hmm.
past,
Hmm.
but you're watching some of those some of those historic athletes do their thing, and then me and my brother just got caught into it, and it was just whether my brother ran distance at the University of North Carolina, so whether it was 800-meter runners, 1500 milers, whatever it might be, that we were following them, we were watching them wherever track meets were, we were traveling to try to see whatever we could see and just learn more about the sport. And then obviously with the meets that we were a part of, we were so embedded. You know, my dad would drop us off. We'd finish our events at a certain point of the day, and it's like, Dad, we don't want to go home yet. We want to hang out and just watch a little bit more. And so I think
Wow.
a lot of, again, what you said, watching it on television, you know, seeing the Donovan Baileys, seeing again, the Ben
Yeah.
Johnson, the folks that went on and did some amazing things for Canada, but also things that were happening, you know, with, track and field with Linford Christie, the
Yeah. Yeah.
folks all over the world that were just doing it at a high level. It just caught our attention and really just became our place to
Huh.
be. Yeah.
So the way you're telling that story sounds like, excuse me, you're you're very assimilated into Canadian culture and Canada because like and it certainly has changed, here in the last 5 years. Like I'm thinking about athletes from the continent of Africa. There's like they're good. They've always been good, but now it seems like there's a lot of them that are good.
Yeah.
But you're mentioning, the guys, with the exception of Linford Christie,
Yeah.
very Canadian people.
Yeah.
Was your Did you ever like have a mind like, hey, who's running for South Africa or who's running for Kenya?
Yeah.
Anything
And
like
this
that? Or
Yeah, and that was, part of it too, because a lot of it was my dad wanting to see what, certain Africans were doing at some of these championships, So it would be, we're tuning in, yes, and we're following, Canadians that are in this race, we're following maybe the popular Americans that are in this race. But then you have your favorites, but then it's like, what's the individual from Cameroon or the individual from Botswana gonna do, and you're
Mhm.
just kind of hoping that maybe, and then even again, we lived in Kenya, and if there was a Ugandan in there, obviously Rwanda at the time didn't have many athletes, but now
Yeah.
a lot more trickling there. But anytime you had someone that you could, somewhat connect to, I
Hmm.
think that part of it drew us. So it was not, again, not just the Canadian part of it, but it was
Hmm.
also like that,
Yeah.
part of it where we're just like fascinated by, okay, the athletes that, maybe represent the continent and what
Yeah.
how they would.
This is kind of related, but not really. But it's a story I kind of wanted to get out there because it's literally happened yesterday. It's interesting the athletes that like transcend
Mhm.
track nerdom. Us track nerds, we know, every athlete, but they're when the average Joe, the average public Joe knows someone in our sport, they've transcended the
Yeah,
sport, right? So you think of Carl Lewis, Donovan Bailey's, those guys did transcend, right? Usain Bolt, of course, right? As
yeah, big
transcended.
time.
Yesterday, I was on the phone with a guy who's not a track guy, not even a necessarily a sports guy. It's actually it's actually a guy who works in like marketing and SEO and social media and things like that. And we're connected through podcasts and stuff. So he was just talking to me and asking me how my job's going and track and all that. And he goes, "Yeah," he goes, been fascinating watching, some things. And I've heard about this kid named Gout Gout, and how. And I was like, it really like I was like. Because Gout Gout's good. I'm not taking anything away from him, but he's not. He hasn't won Olympic gold or anything
Yeah,
like that,
yeah,
right? But I was like, wow. I was like, here's this is an average Joe I'm talking to, and he knows Gout Gout's name. Like that
yeah,
really kind of like and I, then you start wondering like, well, how much do some factors that are out of our control, like him having a name Gout, like does that
yeah,
help? It helped Bolt to be honest. Obviously it
yeah.
was proven to Bolt too, but it added more that his name was Bolt, for crying out loud, right? But it was just kind of like, wow. I was like, I don't think this dude would know any track athlete from Africa at all,
Yeah.
and here he is telling me about Gout. And I was like, I was like, how do you know that guy, man? Like that was just interesting. I don't know. It's not really pertaining to the story. I just
Well,
thought it was
and I
interesting.
think you're right. I mean, the way, back then, I think, remember just jumping on, you're sitting in front of a TV, you're waiting for it to be turned on. You're waiting for the Olympics. You're waiting for certain time periods. So you only knew the athletes, again, if you were really a heavy follower. Now it's like with the scope of social media,
Yeah.
it really, puts, again, Gout Gout, I wouldn't have heard of him unless, I mean, obviously I'm coaching, I'm in it, but it's
Right,
like
right, right.
you turn on social media feeds, you see him all the time with,
Yeah.
so it's a very different time, I
Yeah.
guess.
And it, like I said, I think it helps that he has that unique name, right? Like if he had, if his name was, Joe Williams, it's like,
Yeah.
just some guy named Joe. It's like, well,
Yeah.
not only gout is cool, but guess what? That's both gout,
Oh,
gout. It's like that's kind of cool. It's easy to say. Like no one calls him. It's so interesting when I listen to, Justin Gatlin on Ready Set Go and some other podcasts. No one refers to him as gout. Like,
yeah.
because that's his, like, like you would talk about, oh, there's Sebera, or there's um, um, the Lyles, or
Yeah.
Noah. No one call, you have to say both names for some reason. You
Yeah.
have to say gout, gout. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Right.
so
Otherwise,
cool.
no one knows who you're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah. Gout. Who's gout? Gout, gout. Oh, gout, gout. Yeah, yeah. It's so dumb. That's so funny. All right. Okay. So tell me, say in high school, we're getting real close to move to the next level here. So, what is your relationship with coach? Are you, because spoiler alert, you become a track coach. So, and we're going to find out here soon if coaching is in your brain at all
Yeah.
at this point, but at least something is ticking there because, maybe there's a little seed that gets there because it grows, you become a coach. What's your relationship with coaches?
And I would say this overall, like all my experiences, whether it was basketball, whether it was, a little football in there, um, baseball to track. I think all my experiences were very, 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 very like just very, very good, wholesome experiences in terms of like just having coaches that were just willing to work with you, just willing to just show you, teach you things and move you along. And I think that sparred some things in me and really got me excited about just being around it, just for eternity, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I'd say this, like Coach Frank Buca, who was a small, little, short Italian dude that coached and went to NC State, was a sprinter there. He'd be on his megaphone. Again, at the time, he might have been in the 60s, and now he's, 80s, 90s is
Yeah.
old. But he'd be on his megaphone and he'd yell at you when your next rep was up, and he would, and it was just a very just methodical way of moving through it. You could tell he was just comfortable with coaching and just how he maneuvered kids from point A to point B in terms of his teaching acumen. And that part of it just got me, and got us, me and my brothers, and that kind of just got into track and field in that fashion, and got so close to it. And even my brother, who doesn't coach, but has taken some coaching credential courses. A lot of it is just, based on the fact that we loved the way he thought through training,
Yeah. Interesting.
thought through how an athlete again should move from, again, point A to point B.
Hmm. I love that visual of this. You said short Italian guy with a megaphone.
Everyone just telling you're about it, you just ran a 150 and you're like, oh my gosh, and he gives you the rest time and you're walking back to your point and you're just going, I really hope he does. I don't want to hear him on the
Yeah,
megaphone.
say turn that megaphone. I hope the
I
batteries die. Yeah.
need more recovery. And then he's just like, hey guys, you're up. And you're just, okay, let's go.
I love that. All
Uh,
right. So you finish, I think in Canada we do grade 13, right? If I remember
yeah, at the
correctly.
time they had OAC, they called it OAC, Ontario Academic Curriculum or something of that nature, just
Got
in
it.
preparation for college. But yep,
So
I had an OAC here. Yep.
you start thinking about college. Talk to us about what you were thinking about. What did you think about majoring in? And at this age, 17, 18, 19 years old, what were you thinking of becoming? You're going to become a business owner, international business guy. You got a lot of experience there. I'm going to become a
Yeah.
translator. What were you thinking at that age that you were going to become?
Oh,
And how did you get to college?
I was just like any other high school kid thinking like I'm going to be an Olympian, I'm going to be the superstar athlete. You kind of had these grand, and at the time you look back at it and you kind of go, okay, hold on, like I'm a subpar athlete. Like I'm not, I got to figure this out. I got to think about it a little bit more. So the thought process for me was really okay. My parents, I grew up in a home with both parents where they were both, pushing academics, traditional African family. It's like, I don't care how fast you run. What were your grades? I don't
Mhm.
care that you scored this many points. What were your grades? So at that point, it was kind of like, okay, I have to figure this out, and I have to go to college, and I have to get a degree of some sort. And so school was going to be, a big part of this whole thing. Track could be there, and as I sought out schools and I looked at institutions and looked at places, I was looking for an opportunity with track. But the school thing was the one thing that my parents, prefaced and really made as really placed importance on. Um, I got contacted and spoke with one I consider a mentor, but obviously a good friend, and someone that believed in me in terms of coaching and moving myself into this, and I can get into that later. But he called me up, and I remember I had sent him email or some sort saying that I was interested in running track and field, and he said, "Dan, I have a spot for you." And when I came up to St. Cloud, he had a spot, kind of kept his, and had a place for me, and I joined the program and just kind of went from there.
Wow.
Um,
So what were you thinking about besides the Olympics or the JV Olympics even? That's I need the JV of the JV Olympics if I was ever going to make it. What were you thinking about? Like, oh, I'm going to go major in XYZ because I'm going to
Eh,
become
So I got there and I was like business,
hmm,
and that's like
very
something
common.
on, and I was gonna, go into business and go that route. And then, obviously, like most students, I got settled in, got an understanding of how academia works in the States, and decided, okay, you know what, business was not a thing that I was really interested in anymore. And so then at that point, had made the necessary changes, made the necessary shifts in path, and decided on sports management and recreational therapy as paths to kind of go into. Just that kept me around athletics, and that's kind of the biggest thing. That was kind of what was important to me at that point in time. And I remember stories that my mother tells even now, how there was times where she knew that coaching was probably going to be in my
Hmm.
in or just being in around athletics was going to be in my future, when there was times where hockey games going on, they're in game 7 or game 6 of the playoffs, or the Toronto Blue Jays are playing, and they're in the World Series, and we have to go to bed because it's school night, and I sneak back down to watch. And a lot of it for me is not even necessarily that I ever wanted to play baseball or play hockey but it was just like, I think I could get lost in just some of the chess matches that were taking place behind the scenes with coaches
Yeah.
about, this lineup, that lineup. If we do this, if we do that, what could happen if and even now, I think when I watch basketball, it's always watching it. I never watch the teams because it's not teams that I necessarily care about, but it's more about like, what is this coach going to do?
Hmm.
You know, so I think a lot of those things were evident early on, and my mother would tell, and still tells me to this day, like, when I saw you sneaking or catch you sneaking down to finish a baseball game, or at that point, it became evident to me that this is something that you're
Huh.
going to do in the future. Yeah.
I'm amazed that more than one, several times in a coach's journey, they'll tell me about how, playing video games and playing, NCAA football or whatever, and they would play the coach's mode. So you'd recruit and you'd call play, and that they just love that. And it's like, man, what a precursor, what a little seed that like
Seed.
you're doing exactly what you're doing today, but you're doing it
Yeah.
video game for. That's so it's interesting. So I'm not hearing as you're looking at schools, and it seems like academics was first and track and athletics was second, but still important to you. But I'm not hearing like, oh, because you started in business. I'm not hearing like, oh, I want to become a coach. I'm not hearing that at this point in your journey.
No, because I still wasn't like, I guess I knew I wanted to be around athletics. I just didn't know in what capacity and what that
Yeah.
looked
Hmm.
like. I had no understanding of what vision. It was one of those things where I thought, I'm going to finish up here. I'm going to head back to Canada, and I don't know what I'll be doing. I'll figure it
Right.
out. That kind of thing.
It's amazing. I mean, this is more than half. This is a majority of the coaches that we speak to that even though the job is right in front of them, like, there's a coach in front of this. That's someone who has a job
Yeah.
that's coaching. How many people I mean, many years, like not until college or even after college, realize like, oh, wait a minute. I could do that. Like maybe that could be my job. Like,
Yeah.
even though it's right in front of you, it's being modeled to you. You still don't realize like, oh, that guy or gal's getting paid. Like that's a real job. I could become that job. It's interesting that way. Okay, so you go to St. Cloud's State University. Yeah, boy, in Minnesota. So, oh boy, so you
Yeah.
okay? I'm starting to see a theme already. Here's where we are in Minnesota. So you go to St. Cloud, you start with business and realize, maybe that's not for me. I want to be around athletics and start doing sports management. Hal, talk to me about your college career in regards to relationship with coach and athletics. And did you keep mama proud? Did you keep your grades up and things like
Yeah.
that?
No, so I did what I needed to do. I mean, from an academic standpoint, I think that part of it was obviously drilled in. And one thing that was, definitely reminded to me, my phone calls, whatever it might be. And then I had a great, Seth Mishke, who was a head coach. Now he's coaching at Emporia, but was a head coach,
Yeah.
turned head coach when I had jumped in there. Um, and he was just an awesome, again. when I think about all my coaches and I think about just watching someone and just sitting on the sideline and just watching them maneuver and how they think through things and how they put things together, he was awesome because I learned so much about just kind of sitting back and allowing things to kind of play out and then take form and then interject. And it was just it was very, again, just very methodical in its own way,
Mhm.
um, but he coached me. I had a good experience there. Again, like I wasn't this tremendous athlete, but he gave me an opportunity. And I went there and I met people because part of this is growth. When I think about athletics and I think about it even now in the program that I'm in as an assistant, I think about how track and field grew me as a into the man that I am today. And it sounds cliche, but there's just a lot of different things that you can take from it that you can apply to life. And so, in that experience, I learned a lot from him. He was a young coach, but in those opportunities that he had to teach me and I had opportunities to coach me, I think I was able to kind of sit there and soak in a lot. And then obviously the friendships, the team that he had built, the things that he kind of put together and constructed for us to, achieve what we wanted to achieve, or even fail and understand what failure was. I think those things were huge in that experience and the time that I spent there.
Tell me a story. Obviously, Sean had a big influence on you, and the sport did, right? And that, I think you nailed it. I'm sure band and uh, um, uh, oh gosh, I'm glad my daughter doesn't listen to the podcast. What do you call it when you're on stage acting and stuff? There's a theater,
Yeah,
theater,
yeah, yeah,
theater. Yeah,
yeah,
my daughter's big into theater, and oh my God,
yeah.
Cass, one day you're going to be listening to this. You're going to be 30
Yeah,
years old. I am so sorry. I could not think of theater.
yeah.
Theater, I'm sure I know they have life lessons because again, my daughter's in theater, in a band. My son's in band and is in competitive bass fishing things. So I know they're, but in sport, I think you're right. Not only in regards to the sport itself, you have failures, you have positivities, you have setbacks, you have windfalls, but you have a coach or coaches that are also guiding you, and you're seeing them being imperfect. They make mistakes, and they're there for you when things are off the track or not great or good for you. Tell me a story of an impact he made on you, like whether it was it could be a funny story, some one day told a joke, I don't know, whatever, or pulled you aside and was like, hey, your mom called me, you got to be in English and that's not acceptable or something.
Yeah, and I think mine would be more so from this. Mine would be more about like his ability to say things and be loud, even in silence, you know,
Hmm.
and in
What's that
thought.
mean? Yeah, what's that mean?
And again, I'd say like I remember being a student, stepping in his office. I think there was a semester where my grades were not the best, and I was, potentially going to be on the verge of being ineligible the next
Oh
semester.
wow, really? That
Uh,
surprises me.
yes, yeah. So,
Did mom disown you? Like this doesn't sound like mom would
oh my
allow
gosh,
this. Yeah.
that's another story. That's another podcast. How mom handled that, right? Uh, and I even told my kids, I told my kids those stories. Like, no, grandma wasn't always this. Like, I'll
Yeah,
buy
yeah,
you.
yeah. Yeah, she wasn't my grandma. She was my mom. That's
She was
different.
my
Yeah.
mom. It's very different. Why is grandma always smiling though? She's always happy. No, I don't. Oh gosh, no. But I remember him calling me into his office regarding some of my academic issues and whatnot. Um, and it was just very like the way he moved through the conversation was just very stoic and just kind of like this, hard in thought, you know, tell you kind of this is kind of what we're dealing with. This is what we have in front of us. This is what we have to tackle in front of us. And then he would just kind of go back into his thinking and then just kind of give you another, little sentence and then go back into thinking.
Hmm.
And then you leave there and you kind of go, gosh, like, I don't know, like, what does it all mean? How do I unpack this? But I think in that conversation, in that one opportunity to sit there and think and sit there in his office and take that information from him, I think I learned a lot about just how to like just persevere and work through things and push through things. Just because you you go, okay, he sat there, he told me the things that I have to fix, the things that I have to get, in order in my life, in order for me to like make this. And then at the time, track and field was like, I guess in some instances was everything to me. It's kind of like I was living it. I was, eating well, sleeping well, trying to do the right things by it. And now all of a sudden it might be taken away, and he's trying to share this thing. And in that moment, again, it's the idea that I took in the silence that maybe he understood and saw that this thing was something that I was passionate about, and it was probably harder for him to convey this to me versus maybe even the way I walked out of there taking it, right? Um, and I think from there, I think I learned a lot about learning to persevere, learning to get some information in, take it in, and then go and bad or good, work on the things that you need to work on to put yourself in a position where, you're taking care of the situation, or you're dealing with the and again, that metaphorically, that's kind of the track and field, how the track and field thing can help you, maneuver life. But I feel like there were those moments, and again, it's probably even deeper than that, but there was just those moments where it seemed deeper than it was, and it wasn't just a conversation about my grades, you know. It's him understanding the breadth of what he was telling me, the depth of what he was telling me, knowing that it almost meant everything to me. Um, but he had to say it. He had to put it out there. And I think that part of it was something that I could respect. That part of it was something that I valued and loved, amidst all the things that I was like picking up along the way, running track, being around it, again, the failures, successes, that kind of thing. Um, that that interaction was just huge in itself in terms of propelling me into the saying, oh gosh, like I think this is what I need to be doing. Like this is, you know, um,
What a great example of the positive impact coaches make on young kids every day. Like that moment was obviously very special. That the relationship was very special to you, but that is going on everywhere all the time. In a majority of case, like majority of coaches are very caring about their kids and are helping them understand. Hey, you really like this sport. Track and field here is the specific example. However, if you don't do this other thing,
yeah.
well, this gets taken away from you. And maybe as you were telling that story, it made me think about, what we just talked about, the impact of what sport can do for you and, the highs and lows and what it can teach you about life. I wonder if part of that importance of sport to growing up, and it's obviously not the be all end all because there's plenty of people who don't play sport that go on to be very great human beings. But I wonder for those of us who are inclined to athletics, I wonder if part of the lessons learned is that this is a very finite time. Certainly you may, and maybe you're going to tell me later on, you compete in masters track. Certainly you can do sport for
Yeah.
the rest of your life, but being part of a team is really kind of two parts. And most of it's only one part. There's high school and there's college, and that's typically it. That's the majority of the opportunity you have. So as much as you love track and field, for most of us, the vast, vast, vast majority of us, you got 4 or 5 years, and then it's done, buddy.
The reality is the students that we work with they're passionate about this. Whether they come in as 11th graders and you're recruiting them, kind of moving them into that senior year into college, or whether they're in their third, fourth year. I sit down and do goal meetings every day, and I always tell my athletes, I think, you know, having something you're passionate about, it's great. And I think, like, when you have things in your life that you're passionate about, whether it's, that business program or that social circle that you're involved in, you treat those things carefully. You treat
Mhm.
those things, with a level of care that, is attributed, that allows them to like flourish and be what you want them to be. And then as a result, generally, I always believe that, if you do those things to the things that you're passionate about, the second thing in your life that you're passionate about, whether it's track and field, it seeps in there. And I
I think
think,
so. Yeah.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
think,
Please
yeah.
go ahead. Go. Sorry. Go. Good. Good.
Yeah, no, and so I think there's definitely something there, and I always believe that for my athletes, it's always important to let them know, like, it's okay to be passionate about something. Regardless of what the end result might be. We can't fear that. We can't fear what we don't know. It's, put that foot forward, and
I think you're spot on. Again, that limited time we have athletics and you have passion towards that, then how do we leverage that to transfer that passion to something else, right? So if you have a passion for long jumping and you're not going to make the Olympics, again, no one does, right? So then how do I take that passion you have over that event and become an amazing teacher or an amazing parent or an amazing business owner or, or whatever you go into? I think that's spot on, Brian. I love that. Okay, so you have a good time, a transformative time, it seems like, at St. Cloud State. You continue to develop and grow into the human that you are today. Uh, as you get closer to senior year and graduating, talk to me about, has coaching entered the mind at all? What are we thinking about once we
Yeah, so
graduate? Give us that transition.
gosh, so at this point, again, I've been around athletics. I've been officiating, doing different things, just
Mm,
involving myself in different areas. And I think my experiences, as I stated with Seth, working with Coach Mishki as an athlete there, I think those things start ringing, just opening up some thought processes for me in terms
mhm,
of coaching. And I go into like my last years in college, and I remember telling myself this, okay, like this is something I want to do. Like I want to see different ways to do this. I want to look at it from different vantage points and see what it looks like. I remember going into Coach Lego. Coach Lego was the basketball coach at St. Cloud State at the time. Um, and I worked his camps and refed and officiated some of his camps. And I asked him, I said, okay, listen, I don't know if this is possible. You guys have your practices, and I know no one's in there during your practices, but is it possible that I can just sit in? I just want to learn to like coach to how you. I want to see you how you communicate with your athletes. I want to see, when things are crappy. I want to see when things are great. I want to learn how you set up your practices, organize the training environment. And this is basketball, but it was kind of like, like I figured a coach is a coach. I can. He says yes to this. And I remember that whole year, it could have been my junior or senior year, but that whole year going, I'd finish whatever I needed to do. I think we had early practices at the time, but then I would, finish my classes and then I would head over. He'd let me, or they'd let me into the practice session, and I would just sit there on the sideline, not even taking any notes, but just watching and observing. And I would see when athletes did things wrong or incorrectly, and he was on them when things were great. And then I would watch also just down to like the nitty-gritty when he'd sit down with his coaching staff and communicate to them how he wanted to organize things. Just some of those things that were very integral to like running a quality program that I thought was going to be, great. And again, at the same time, obviously, I'm in the track world, but I wanted to see something different. I'm there with Seth. I'm seeing Seth. I wanted to see something different. And so this provided that. And I could sit in there, watch his practices. Eventually, it became a thing where I was like, okay, Coach Alfritz, who was the women's coach, would let me sit in her practices, and from time to time, I just come in and I would sit there hours just watching, observing, and learning and just kind of seeing how things were maneuvered, just the little things that were going to be, helpful. And at that point, I realized this is something I can do, you realize that it's working with people, it's communicating, it's caring about their goals, uh, the things that they want to accomplish. Uh, Really, that's what it comes down to, and I figured I could, put those things together. So those experiences, once I had those experiences, I definitely knew profoundly that it was like, okay, coaching was a thing. So I finished up and then moved to my mother's house in North Carolina. For about like half a year applying to graduate schools, and I was going to go to NC State to didn't have a GA, and I was reaching out to coaches to be a GA. Didn't have a GA for me, but my younger brother was starting at NC State as a freshman, and I was like, I'm gonna go to NC State as a graduate student. I got into the graduate program there, but the GA that I had was in golf management. I had no clue what it was. But I could figure it out, right? And they got me this scenario. So I'm sitting in North Carolina, getting prepared. Summer's finishing up here, and getting ready to potentially get started. And then I get a call from Seth at St. Cloud because I'd also applied to St. Cloud for graduate school. And then he calls me up and says, Brian, I have a GA here for you in track and field. If you come here, uh, we can figure it out. I'll get you a GA and you can help me coach. And I was like, hold on a second, that's much better than what I don't know. So then figured it out and ended up back in St. Cloud to coach. Yeah.
Brian, that level of, I don't know if it's maturity or understanding. Like, I'm floored by you going to the basketball coaches to observe coaching, not basketball coaching, coaching. Like
Yeah.
that, like that's a different level of thinking that, I haven't heard that story yet. Like, if you would have said, I called the Minnesota guys up and track coaches and was like, hey, I want to, I know what Seth does. I'm in his program. But I want to see what you guys do and just let me observe, like for track and field. I'm like, oh, okay, like that's a story I've heard before. But for you to just like, okay, I'm just going to go observe basketball. I want to see how they correct kids, how they promote positive kids, how they, that's, that's interesting to me because
A
like
very good approach, but it was, I don't know, I was just a reach to saying, okay,
yeah.
I don't have the means of traveling. I mean, I was an international student. I don't have the means of traveling X.
Yeah.
Like, what do I
But,
have in front of
but even okay, so I've heard the story of a kid who, halfway through college or whatever says, I know I'm going to be a track coach. And so, head coach, I know you coach me, but I'd like to come in after hours and pick your brain. There's what we do in the track for our practice is one thing, but now I want to pick your brain in the office. Like that, like if you just said that, like, oh yeah, I started meeting with Seth every day for an hour. I'd pick his
me?
brain and things like that. Like I'd be like, oh, okay, that's a story I could see. But for you to understand, like, oh, there's coaching track, sure, but there's coaching.
Yeah.
And so for you to say, okay, well, maybe I can get in with the basketball guys and just watch.
Yeah.
You didn't say I wanted to watch the basketball coaches because I thought, well, maybe that's more lucrative, so I want to become a basketball coach, not a track coach. So I'm going to watch how they do their X's and O's and all that kind of stuff. You didn't say that. You're like, I just want to watch how coaching, the activity of coaching happens. That's really tremendous. It makes me wonder, we all have our boxes that we're in, and if you think you're not in a box, you are squarely in a box for
Yeah.
sure, people. But like I think about track, I'm in a track and field box now. It makes me wonder, like, what can we learn from other sport coaches? And I know we've had, John Wooden has a book, and Phil Jackson and things like that. So there are books like that where they're trying to teach about coaching, and really life lessons is what they're teaching. But I wonder now, like, oh, I wonder if there's a way, like we have this sub podcast here called the Gill 1918 Project, which are 10 to 30 minute
Yeah.
kind of TED Talks of track and field where we get into X's and O's or culture. Like I'm wondering, like, oh, I wonder if is there an ability, is there something for our coaches to learn to have a baseball coach, a basketball coach, a football coach, a golf coach, talk about like, hey, here's how we run practices. You're not going to pick something up for your track practice from that, but maybe you pick up something like, oh wow, that coach before every tennis practice
Yeah.
goes and shakes the hand of every person on the team and asks them how their day was. Like maybe I should be doing that with track. You know what I'm saying? Like I wonder if there is so much more to learn about coaching
Yeah.
from other from other good, good coach is a good coach, right? And a good coach is not necessarily, we have been exploring this a lot this podcast, is that the X's and O's might be the easy part. So how to actually coach a long jumper or a sprinter or a distance runner might be the easy part. The other 80%, the culture, like what do you do with your kids? How do you talk with your kids? How do you recruit? That might be the more, like how you run your program. That might be the more important part of it.
Yeah.
And so maybe we can learn that from other sports coaches that are successful. Not how to coach a tennis player to hit a forehand, but how do you conduct your practice, or how do you end every one of your practices, or how do you conduct a one-on-one meeting, whatever. Maybe you conduct one-on-one meetings, and me as a track coach needs to learn that or something. That's just super. I'm fascinated by that.
And
You're
again, I
you're
didn't do
22, 23 years old. Like that fascinates me that you're a kid still at that age, dude.
it.
That you had that like forethought of like, I just want to go see coaching. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, and I think that that part of me was just something that was, it was not even necessarily that I was going to find something like that was profound, but it was just the idea that, you know, to be a coach, I just thought like that's the one connecting piece. Like you're working with people, you're communicating with students, I mean specifically collegiate coach, you're communicating with student athletes, you have goals, you're intentional, as long as you're intentional about this culture, this thing that you're bringing forth. I thought like those things are things that are parallel amongst all of us as coaches. So it was more so to say, okay, you know what, if I want to do this thing, there's things I'm going to learn that I can take with me. I don't necessarily think that, I'm necessarily going to be teaching a motion offense in one of my, high jump practices, but it was just
Right.
more about, it was more about like, okay, like how do I conduct and run that environment.
Yeah, yeah. You're talking about culture and leadership, really. Like when you talk about that, yeah, that's what you're talking about. How do I conduct a practice? Well, that's leadership. You do it because you're a leader and not let the kids run the practice.
Yeah.
You're the coach, be the coach. That's a saying that my mentor, Bouchek Nader, used to say all the time. He's like, you the coach, be the coach. You know, that means be the leader that you're supposed to be.
I
So
like that accent.
yeah,
That
yeah,
was
yeah. That's
well
the
done.
as Cajun as I can get for with Boo on that one. So you the coach, be the coach. Yeah, I heard it a million times. That's like the
Uh,
one little sentence I can say.
uh,
But that's just tremendous. Kudos to you for the maturity and again just the thought process to have that. That's so super cool, super cool. All right, so you bounce a little bit. You go to North Carolina, and then Seth calls you back up and says, "Hey man, come back home. This home, come back to
yeah,
St. Cloud."
yeah.
So you become a GA. You do that for what degree did you get for your graduate?
So there again, did a sport management
Hmm.
master's, and did some. It was kind of interesting because I was able to blend it with some different things, but did some educational pieces in there because I ended up going on and doing a doctorate in education because I had some research things I wanted to do, and I met interesting professor there that kind of led me down a different path because I was like all of a sudden thinking, okay, coaching, but I had still had no clue like this coaching thing I could make a career and just
Yeah.
like you know I'm still thinking to myself like I still got to get out there and get a real job eventually. I mean coaching is you know um, is there and it's definitely a possibility, but I still kind of looked at it as this auxiliary, this thing that I could get a job and coach and help out here,
Right.
um, and so I met an interesting professor by the name of Dr. Moore while doing my master's work. He led me down some interesting paths as far as research, and I was able to do some, fun things. Also volunteer with some very, very um, passionate folks in some nonprofits with some of the changes that were happening from a diversity standpoint in the area that I lived in at the time. And that was kind of like breaking me off into these two different paths. At the same time, it was kind of one of these things where, I've now been here. Now I was there for, I don't even know now, it was probably close to year eight. You
Hmm. Hmm.
sorry, like year six, year eight with
Hmm.
Seth. And so, yeah, it was kind of one of those things where I finished up my master's work, and then I'm kind of like, okay, I don't know where I'm going to go. And he offers me a $5,000 job.
Dude, you
Now,
amaze me.
now I say this, I say he offers me this $5,000 job. At the time, I'm kind of in the place where I've done this research, and now at this point, I want to do my doctorate. I know I want to do my doctorate. I don't know where I'm going to go do it. I've applied to several different schools to go do this thing, and um, then I stay for the year while I'm trying to figure all that out, or stay for a couple years and I'm just coaching. And my mother's helping me live on my friend's floor or help pay rent on my friend's floor. And I'm building my, I guess, resume, if you want to call it that, right? Going through it. So then, yeah, I just kind of blended from a GA into this like assistant coach role kind of thing. Um, and then I finally decided I'm going to go do my doctorate, and they had a program there. I looked at a couple different places, but what I settled on was the mere fact that where I was currently at, they offered me basically a full-time job coaching, and now I could do my doctorate, and that was going to be paid for as well. So then it was kind of like, okay, this is a no-brainer. I
And that
can
was at St. Cloud?
think out. So then I just decided to just get it done there.
Wow. Okay. Couple so much to unpack there. One is I'm always curious because I think it should be a rule that this is not allowed. How did you handle the transition from, and you certainly are coming at a pretty high maturity rate as a call it a senior in college. So maybe it was easier for you, but how did you transition? How did you handle the transition from, on Friday, spring semester, you were one of the guys, you were a long jumper on the team or whatever event and playing Xbox on Friday night with the dudes, with the team.
Yeah, yeah,
And then on Monday, you're a GA, you're a coach.
yeah,
And I know there's a summer involved, all that kind of stuff, but still, you were GA coaching kids that were teammates of yours. There was no separation there. That's not like I said. I think it should be,
yeah.
without using the word illegal, but it should be against the rules because I don't think anybody handles that transition very well. Because I was in college once too. So how did you handle like, okay, guys, you got to see me in a little bit different light?
Yeah, no, I think it was pretty seamless, and a lot of it's kind of interesting. One of my college teammates, who's Jason Cook, who's now I think he's the head coach, men's head coach at Hastings High School here in Minnesota. Uh, he had a place, and he was also doing his master's work and also helping out with track and field. So basically, I hung out with him the whole time, and we kind of just didn't blur the lines. We kind of kept our, we
That's
did
cool.
have, actually, I will say this, we did have two athletes that were currently on the team living with us. One of them was a pole vaulter, so I never really, worked with him a
So,
lot.
so I didn't talk to that dude.
But Andrew Stack, the other kid that the other athlete that was there, uh, was roommates as well, and so it was one of those things where I think both. I mean, the group that was they were mature, and then living with Jason, he was just a breath of fresh air, just in
Yeah,
terms of just doing other things, introducing me to fishing, things that I just never involved, so it
yeah.
was just like we'd finish with track, we'd finish with our schoolwork, and then we'd just go do these other things, fishing, or, we would be, helping out in the community doing something,
Yeah. I think that's the concern I had. You said blurring the lines, but I'm also not naive enough to think that life is delineated with
Yeah,
clear seen lines either. So, I was an undergraduate coach and also had roommates that were on the team. So while I was not teammates with them because I was terrible,
yeah,
but I was of their age.
yeah, yeah,
I was 19,
yeah,
20, 21 years
yeah.
old and, it was college. Like, I'll leave you to your imagination of what all that means and stuff. But like I think I look back and go, man, I'm so glad I was able to do it because I got me a degree and, didn't
Yeah.
have any student loans and all that kind of stuff. But I'm also like, oh yeah, coach should have never done that. Like, he should have made me live on my own. Like, that's not healthy, as far as coach and athlete relationship there. So,
And I think
uh,
the athletes that we chose to live with, I think more so with them, it was more about like the fact that they were also of mature state. We never really hung out with them, I would say.
yeah,
They
yeah,
were
yeah, yeah,
base with us, but it was just kind of like
yeah.
passing and going, and we are just doing our graduate work. And the house that we are living in actually was owned by a former track athlete, so it's kind of the reason why they were kind of put
Right.
in. Yeah, no, it was, we're so embedded in our studies, our research, me and
Yeah.
Jason. Then it was just we'd go and coach and travel for these track meets, and then it was just kind of that. We just left it at that, and that was it. But
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of when I think about your maturity, and then I just remember my maturity, and that's where
oh
I'm
god,
like, oh, this could not have, it's not good. And it's just I'm basing this all off of my idiotic
oh
self
gosh.
at 20 years old.
I think more of it was my mother. Like
Yeah.
once she knew
Well,
like with graduate school, you better do this thing right.
yeah. Okay. So that was actually another thing I wanted to unpack. So you become a coach, you go through and get your grad work, and now you're doing kind of starting out. I'm gonna call it part time, 5,000 a year, and then you kind of move to full time assistant coach there,
Yeah.
right? Does mom disown you? And what I mean by that is, mom. I'm just getting the picture of mom being the very
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's cool and all. What about your grades? Are you getting a real job? This is
Yeah.
just what I kind of picture mom. How is
Yeah.
mom handling? Like, you're kind of full blown. You're going. And the next thing I want to unpack is this PhD thing. You are continuing on with a very high
Yeah.
academic thing. So I feel like mom's very pleased about that. I don't
God.
think mom's is very pleased about you being a track coach.
Yeah, and I would say that I think what kind of kept everything afloat and allowed me to continue doing the coaching thing was the fact that I was still in school. Being able to say, "Mom, I'm gonna do this master's thing." My mother's like, "She's gonna do this master's thing. Like, we got to get behind this."
Right, right.
that so I think the school part of it really helped push along the idea of coaching,
Yeah,
again, still not knowing like it could turn into this thing, but it was kind of like, you know yeah, you can still do this thing and coach as long as you're working on this master's degree,
yeah,
right? So those things kind of help. And my dad was always supportive. My dad was always kind of he was an educator and then turned into a nurse, but he was always just kind of in the background, just like, yep, it's what you
yeah.
want to do. And he'd push my mother in the right direction in terms of
Yeah, I bet he thinks that. I'm married too, buddy. And I think sometimes I push my wife and whatever, man, she's leading the way here. Oh, I just, I have this picture of your mom and just like
uh,
the blessing that she is. Like, we need moms like that. We
yeah.
need more moms like your mom. So I'm just kind
Yeah.
of like in the background, I'm thinking she's like, this track coaching thing is not a real job. Okay, you're getting your
Yeah.
grad work. All right, good, good. You're still doing master. Oh, you're getting PhD. Okay, all right, all right. We're going to get to the point where, all that's done and you're a full-time coach. We're going to learn about what mom thinks now.
Yeah.
We'll hold on to that. So let's talk about this PhD. Did you go on and get your actual PhD?
Yeah. So I got a EDD, so doctorate in education.
Okay.
Um, and so I started my doctorate work going into, I mean, I got married that summer got married to my college girlfriend,
Uh-huh.
8 years. And then we basically moved to that St. Cloud area. And then I basically locked in on this doctorate program. And again, at the time, I started with the assistant coach position, and Seth was still head there, and we were just working together, recruiting, trying to keep the group as competitive as possible. I was trying to soak in and learn and take any advantage of any time I had, take any advantage of any developmental or develop any what is it? I'm losing the word now, but any professional development opportunities that were available. Um, and so yeah, started into that EDD and the most rigorous thing I've ever
Dude.
done in my life. Oh my gosh.
We had, so I don't know much about PhDs, EDDs. I can barely spell that.
Oh
But
gosh.
just recently, we I'm from Alabama. Always remember
Oh
that. Okay,
geez.
yeah. You'll think much better of me if you just remember I went to high school and college in the state of Alabama. You're like, oh, that guy's he's really overcoming things. So, uh,
Oh,
but recently we had Arkansas State's head coach on the podcast, Jim Patchell, Dr. Jim Patchell,
yeah.
who got a PhD. And again, my curiosity brain just never turns off. And so I bet you for I don't know a good 30 minutes of his entire podcast is me just asking questions about the PhD process,
Yeah.
the dissertation and just all of that kind of stuff. I was just fascinated by it. I learned,
Yeah.
just I didn't know. So I kind of had like this image of like, defending your dissertation of you're sitting here and there's like these five judges or whatever up and he's like, yeah, it's not far off. But I learned from him that like anybody can go to that dissertation, that defense. Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't.
Oh my God.
I'm so weird. I was like, so you're telling me I could? We were in Champaign, right, University of
Yeah.
Illinois. I was like, so you're telling me I could like, because I know that happening right here at U of I. I was like, so I can. And he goes, yeah, just call up like the department head and ask him what when. And I was like, I'm totally doing that this summer. At some point, I just got off a bunch of travel, but at some point this summer or fall, I am absolutely wanting to do this.
Oh, they're
I will not understand anything that's going on, but I'll just be like, this is cool, man. It's a cool process. Well,
yeah.
that's cool, man. So I should be calling you Dr. Sebera, not
Oh gosh.
coach. I love it. I love it. So you go on. I can't believe you get an EDD. That's just. I mean, I never wanted to go to grad school. When I got done with my undergrad, I was like, bro, I'm done. That's enough school. I've been going to
Oh, and
school
that's
since
what
I
I
was.
thought. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was.
yeah. Well, I knew. I didn't just think it. I knew I was done
Yeah,
with it. So when people tell me grad work, I'm like, man, that's pretty cool. I could never do that. And then somebody tells me to get a doctorate. I'm like, oh God, what? Like, why? Like, this is crazy. Some people I think are just addicted to being students.
yeah.
Like they don't want to go into the real world. Now, this is not the case I'm saying here, Brian,
No,
but
no,
I
no.
think some people like they want to defer the real world and getting a job and things like that. So they go and get multiple,
Yeah.
master's degrees and doctorates and things because it's safe for
Yeah.
them in that sense. But it's like, man, one day you got to get
I
kicked out of the nest and go to the real world
Oh,
here.
God. I enjoyed the research. I think for me, it was really the research. I was
That's
kind of
pretty evident, actually. I was going to say that. It seems like when you were talking about the research and in that professor that you had that, kind of,
talking more.
yeah, that was like your face kind of lit up, and I was like, oh, this is kind of your jam here in this
Shout
side.
out to
Yeah.
Dr. Moore at the University of Eastern Carolina who helped me out with
Hmm.
like it was and uh he was amazing just in his vision of what I could do. I remember him once he got the job at ECU and I was telling him like, yeah, I think I'm just gonna like try to figure this out and go back home to Canada. He's like, Brian, you thought about applying to graduate school? He's the one that actually had me apply to for a
Wow.
master's degree at NC State because he had a friend there. Um, and yeah, he was just an awesome
That's
individual to
cool.
see what he saw in me. Uh, you know,
We need people like that in our lives, man. So that's so cool. Again, I'll say this a million times. The superpower of a coach is being able to see something in the athlete before they can see it in themselves. Like you've had plenty of athletes that you're like, dude, you're a 25-foot long jumper, and they're like, dude, I barely jumped 22. It's like, no, I've seen this, right? So you see it before they do, and they end up jumping 25. That same this kind of superpowers in a lot of people, people like that the ECU professor sees like, hey, no, you need to apply for grad. Like, what do you mean you're not thinking about grad school? You're a brilliant guy.
I'm looking at
We
him
need.
like you're looking. Yeah, I'm like, what the
Yeah.
heck are you talking
And he
about, dude?
saw that in you though before you could see it. He was a
Oh, yeah.
coach to you. He saw that and he was like, "Oh man, I know you can't see it, but trust me, dude.
Yeah.
You're meant for this." That's so cool. I love that you had that guy in your life. That was needed. I love that. Okay, so you go through you're at St. Cloud, you get your PhD or your EDD, is that what it is? Your
Yeah, EDD, educational doctorate. Yeah.
educational doctorate. Um, what happens after that? You still at St. Cloud? Where do we go
So,
next? What are we doing?
so this is about the time I kind of get that
Are
the
you doing? I'm sorry, I am the worst at interrupting people. Because I'm just trying to paint the whole picture here. Are
Yeah,
you, because you're so academic inclined, I'm wondering during this time frame as well, are you doing coaching education formally? And what I mean by that is, so there's formal and informal in my mind for coaching education. Informal is peer to peer. You know, you call another coach up and you're talking with Sean, et cetera. Very important. I'm not saying one's more important than the other. The formal coaching education is USATF level one, level two, USTFCA Academy, things like that. Are you doing any of that during this time frame as
Yes,
well?
yes, yeah. So again, like I said, I'm taking advantage of any
I knew
opportunity. If
you
I have the
would.
time, I am, jumping all over it. And again, obviously during that spell of my doctorate work, I was pretty much, it was 3 years just really locked in. And it took me, and it was seven, they give you 7 years to do it. I took all seven, you know, research and everything else. But
Sure.
then again, and then the head, it came to a head when my wife was like, okay, Brian, because once your 7 year time frame is up, you basically have to restart the whole thing again.
Oof.
So my wife was like, no, 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 no. You got this thing paid for free. You're gonna finish this thing. And I'm like, wait, what do you mean? She takes, I mean, this is like in the summer, I can't remember the summer, but it was just like, I'm taking the kids up to my parents' farm in South Dakota where she's from. And you are gonna spend your weekends working on the thing. So I'm like just
Wow.
embedded, floors covered in research. I'm like just doing matrices, just matching different things I got out of different interviews I pulled, just trying to get it all, all organized and all together. And then,
That's like a
uh,
scene from a movie. Like
yeah,
I can see all these papers around. You got them up on the wall.
yeah.
Equation. Like that's so cool.
Now, prior to all this, I was again coaching, and then I come into the office one day and I sit down. Seth wants to talk to me, and he's like, Brian, and it was just like very like nonchalant. He's kind of like, Brian, you're the new head coach here at St. Cloud. I'm like, wait. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this is a joke in my head. Just kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
playing.
yeah.
And he's like, well, I took another job at Black Hills and I'll be leaving. And I've told administration you're gonna, so then that's kind of what lagged my doctorate work because I was like, oh gosh, now I'm running a program, you
Wow.
know. And at this juncture, it's about the time where it all sets in. It's like, oh my gosh, like I can be a coach and make a living out of this. Like, you know. Um, and that only lasts for about a year because they kind of go in a different direction. They hire a new AD at the time, so the AD that was there, and then the new AD kind of has a different path that she wants to go,
Sure.
which is fine. And then I ended up finding myself in different avenues. But again, once I get through that and I kind of move into working at the College of St. Benedict with the women's program there, it's about the time where I'm like, okay, I got to get this doctorate thing done. My wife is on me, and so yeah, so that realization of coaching really became very evident to me once uh, I was given that position, that head coach position role,
Yeah.
as an interim coach for about a year there at St. Cloud, and
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like those forks in the road where we have to make decisions. And sometimes
yeah,
we don't think they're very big decisions, but they have very big consequences in our life. And I think with coaching, I think everybody kind of goes through that at some point. Some very early, some later, where it's like, okay, yeah,
yeah,
this is who I am. Or the opposite. Hey, you know what? This is not who I am. I need to be doing something else for many, many reasons. So I love that. So St. Cloud for a year is the interim or the head coach there. New ADs and whatever. I no one's a bigger fan of track and track coaches than I am. And when I hear that sometimes about the AD wanting their own track, I'm like, it's track. Let's settle down here.
yeah,
If as long as they're doing a good job and they're not doing anything illegal, or there's not, they're good to their kids. Like, what do you mean you think you have a better track person? Like, get out of here. I know where track, Mr. and Mrs. AD. I know where track ranks on you. Get
yeah.
out of here. That's
Uh,
just silly stuff.
well,
Okay, but she made her decision. So
yeah.
unfortunately, this silly stuff affected your life. So you go to I heard you say
I go to the College of St. Benedict, which is in
yep.
central Minnesota. Kind of keeps me around the area.
Mhm, mhm.
And during that time, they were able to kind of formulate a position for me and kind of get me situated. I also took on an executive role with a half marathon thing that they did in that area. A friend of mine owned it, and they were like, "Brian, we need someone to run this thing. We have these meetings with Shields and whatever these organizations get." So I did that as well, and it kept me at home. And then I'd go and coach in the afternoons and kept me around coaching. Um, definitely a tough year because we
Yeah.
thought definitely I'd probably have that head coaching position and we'd, settle in. But that didn't happen that way. And I think, I think, like again, all things happen for a reason. It sounds cliche, but I think it happened and it
Hmm.
was what it was. But it forced me to kind of really think about, okay, what was next and what I needed to do. And then again, jumping over to St. Ben's and having that experience there, I think also ultimately helped me grow as a coach.
Hmm.
My time there with Coach Balder Lanu, Robin, who's still there, was, I learned a lot from the women that I coached. I learned a lot from working with a women's coach
Hmm.
about coaching women in general.
Hmm.
Um, and then just coaching athletes in general. I think she was very, very, she was a high school coach, she coached at Monticello High School and was a teacher, and then moved into starting the program and then collegiate coach, obviously at St. Ben's for many years. But she had a culture. It was one of those things where I just came in and it was seamless.
Hmm.
Like I just was able to just fall in. And again, one, I was able to coach athletes and work with them and try to develop the athlete. And then on top of that, was able to learn and absorb a lot in terms of just how to build culture, how to
Hmm.
sustain culture, how to, move people along. And it was a private institution, so also recruiting. I learned a
Hmm.
lot.
Hmm. Hmm.
Private versus public, the dollars are very different. Scholarship pieces were a little different as well too. So I learned a lot in the 5 years that I spent there.
Wow.
Uh, yeah.
Where after 5 years, where do we go?
So during the in-between time there, while I was still working at St. Ben's and helping out, I took a job that allowed me to a little work a little bit more with my doctorate, because it was student affairs was kind of the direction,
Hmm.
was the emphasis on my doctorate. So at one point or another, I kind of had worked like about 3 years with St. Ben's, and I talked to Baldur and Lunas like, listen, think I'm gonna take a different role. I just need a change of pace. And I jumped into higher ed, just doing something a little different, but still coaching on the side. And then it became evident to me when I was sitting behind a desk working, and I just wasn't impacting people in the same fashion that I thought I was impacting them when I was coaching.
Hmm.
It's like I sat down with my wife and we had a long conversation, but the gist of it was I need to get back into coaching. I need to be doing that full time. I think that's my classroom. That's my and it was tough, but she got behind me and I was in tears. I was like literally going, okay, this is crazy, but I feel this way and I don't know what to do. I don't know that I could sustain this any other way if I don't.
Right.
Um, it's kind of funny because um I got back into coaching. I was working with at St. Ben's. I take a group to nationals, and I have two multi-eventers competing at the national meet in Geneva, Ohio,
Hmm.
and um, I'm in the middle of high jump competition. I'm getting these calls from like 605 number in South Dakota. I'm like, I don't like I unless it's an emergency. I mean, Brandy's family is from that area. Maybe there's something going on and I'm in the middle of the high jump. I can't do anything. So I wait, finish, go and get these messages and I listen and it's a director at the University of Sioux Falls.
Hmm.
This time I'm just coaching part-time, but I wanted to get back into it full-time. And he's like, he just leaves a message. He's like, I'd like to talk to you about a position that I have here. If you'd be interested, please give me a call back, that kind of thing. So I wait for everything to subside. The day kind of finishes. I call him up and we have a discussion. Doug was his name at the University of Sioux Falls, and he had just taken over as the head or the director of the program. And so he was a high school coach, didn't know much about Division II and maneuvering paperwork, administrative things. So he just needed kind of an associated coach to kind of help with those pieces and whatnot. And so I reached out to him and I was like, yeah, I'm very intrigued by this. It's Sioux Falls. It's not too far from my wife's family. I think she would, definitely be interested in that. And so from that point, I went out there, interviewed, and um, he offered me the position. And then I jumped
Yeah.
back to coaching full time. Yeah.
That's a cool little campus. I've been there actually several times. So I really like that area and that
Not too far
campus.
from Pakistan. You can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, that's right. So how long, and I'm kind of moving us forward a little bit just for time because I want to make sure we spend some time at Minnesota State. How many years at Sioux Falls and where do we go next?
So we spent 2 years there. Now, during that time, the difficulty was that Turgeon had just gotten the position here as I accepted the position at Sioux Falls.
Hmm.
And we were obviously from the discussions that we've had, but he wanted me. I remember him sending me a message saying, "You idiot, why did you accept the position at Sioux Falls? I was going to hire you here." And I was like, well, this is just,
You got to let me know.
well, he had just gotten the position and I
Yeah,
had accepted it and
yeah.
whatever else. And so,
So how did you know him? Because you mentioned you knew him before
so
you.
I met him as a GA at St. Cloud.
Okay.
And he obviously was a throws coach at Winona, helping with that
Mm,
program. And then
that's right.
my teammate at one point, and then throws coach at St. Cloud, uh, asked me one night to come and hang out with the other throws coaches, and I was like, yeah, I'll go do that. And
Of course
network,
you would. Yeah.
you
Hmm.
know. And I
Hmm.
went down and sat and met him for the first time, and then
Got it.
uh, we had just kind of off the cuff discussions about just things in general, and
Hmm.
left it at that, and then we just kind of stayed in touch
Yeah,
along.
that's
Uh,
cool.
yeah, no, no,
I,
no.
I think we need to highlight that story right there, Brian, because all too often when I go to conventions or track meets, etc., I'll see all the sprint coaches hanging out, all the throws coaches hanging out, and certainly I see some cross, throws, a sprints, a distance, etc. And I think it's important for people to remember that when someone becomes a head coach, they don't necessarily 99 times out of 100, they don't need to go then hire someone in that event area. So Mike, being a throws coach when he became the head coach of Minnesota State, didn't go look for other throws coaches to then hire. He needed a jumps coach, a sprints coach, a distance coach. So I think it's important that we take advantage. So when your friend called you and said, "Hey, a bunch of throws coaches are hanging out," that you didn't go, "Ugh, what do I want to talk about? A bunch of throws coaches? I don't know anything about it. I don't have passion.
Oh gosh.
Do they want to talk about jumping? I can talk to them about that."
Yeah.
But instead, you're like, "All right, cool. Let's go see
Yeah.
what's going on down there." I think that, and it obviously led to this, but I think that's an important lesson for us to learn that, hey, you need to, if you're thinking about, your career development, and I hate to use the word networking because I think most people network incorrectly, but if you're thinking about your career development, I think you better make sure you are learning and getting to know people outside of your event group. Not only for maybe you get hired one day, but guess what? If you become a head coach, well, you better know some throws coaches, distance coaches, you better know people of other venues so that you can trust. Like Mike did when he called you and said, "What are you doing?" I was going to hire. I got to know you. I liked you. I can trust you. I want you on my staff. So I think that's just an important story to highlight there about that. Don't just hang out with event group people. You better be learning other event groups
It's so
people.
that's a big, I think every step along the way, people I've met play a very instrumental role in, how I coach, how I maneuver things, how I think about things.
Hmm.
I think even that conversation that I didn't think much of a long time, so many years ago with Turgeon, it just led itself to just this relationship that was just kind of like, you just
You
talk with someone, you get,
you
yeah.
I think it's important that you allowed yourself to be to that happen. Again, you didn't close yourself down, be like, what am I going to learn from a throws coach? I'm never going to coach it, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, but he may hire you one day or vice versa. Yeah, love it. So Sioux Falls, 2 years. So from Sioux Falls to Minnesota State,
State, yes, yeah,
and
yeah.
you've been there, you said 7 seasons
7 years,
now?
yeah, yeah.
7 seasons.
Yeah, yeah.
So tell me what it's like, because Minnesota State is one of those programs. I got to know more about it when Parno is an OG on the podcast. I think he was guest number like 16, 15. Like he
Yeah,
trusted me from the get-go when this wasn't even a thing, man. So I love Chris. Shout out to him and what he does. And he's a very, you talk about a guy who, actually you guys probably get along well, right? Because I think I was just about to call him a very like educational coach, meaning,
oh my God,
he
yeah.
teaches level ones and has his own courses. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're an educate, like you guys are, you're teachers at heart that happen to be teaching track and field. So
Fairfield,
I
yeah.
assume you guys get along really well.
Gosh,
Tell us about the culture at Minnesota State, because it seems like you guys. I see you guys at track meets. You guys seem to have a lot of fun. But on top of that, and that's super fun, or super important. I think you should have fun with your profession and your sport. But you are also winning at the very high level. Tell me, just kind of give us like peel the curtain back here a little bit and give us kind of an inside look on the culture there at Minnesota State.
yeah, and I think, um, yeah, the culture is, again, unlike anything I've ever really experienced in terms of just, winning. And again, I think prior to even being a part of this program, I think there's been seeds that have been planted. Uh, and I think when I met with Turgeon originally, and we talked about this opportunity and the position, the one thought that came up was this place being a very um, uncovered, just hidden gem, in the sense that there's tons of resources, a lot of support. Um, but now it just needed the right direction, and the culture just needed some forming, and just restructuring and rebranding, if you want to call it that. But Turgeon has done an awesome job of really cementing that, and I think he gets it out on us as coaches in terms of like creating. We have these meetings where it's just we're sitting down, we're talking about, the decisions that we make now, how are they going to affect, winning? Are they going to affect, now again, all of this is done within the framework of, you know this path that's holistic in a sense. We're the reality of this is that we're college coaches on an academic campus, on a university campus. Students
Mhm.
are here to learn, to grow themselves, whether it's spiritually, culturally, socially, professionally. There's so many vast, so there's the framework is these things are the things that have to be present, students moving through, matriculating through their 4 years. But at the same time, we need to also have this thought process in mind. So how do we make these things available to us? How do we make these opportunities, winning opportunities, within our grasp or clutches without us not shaking up or affecting the bottom line? And I think he's done a tremendous job of setting us up in terms of saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to align you guys up with the things that you guys need. Myself, Coach Parno, Coach Held, Coach Baloo, these are the things you need. You lay them out for me. I'm gonna make sure that you have these things. And then you go out and affect success, affect success in small ways, but let it lead to the big picture. And that's something that just resonates, And again, I see it in I see it even within the coaching staff. Us as coaches, we sit down and I look at Parno's group, and I'm always thinking to myself, how can I get my group to that place? Coach Held does the same thing, and we kind of do this. We can, amongst, I mean, and it's a very we do it in a friendly manner, but it's done in such a way where we're always thinking about moving ourselves forward, putting ourselves in a position to succeed without disrupting the bottom line, and then utilizing the resources that are in front of us, utilizing the things that are available to us. And I think a lot of the things we're here, they're just never being, used in the manner that we're utilizing them now. Yeah.
You know, culture is one of those things that, there is a definition. I'm sure if I look in the dictionary, or who has a dictionary? I'm sure if I Google the definition of culture, there's a definition there, right?
Uh,
But it's hard to actual define like in real world, you did a great job of explaining like the culture of Minnesota State, but that's hard to. There's so much more to it than what you just said there. Things that you can't even think of right now. Things that just happen instinctively between you and the coaching staff, the
yeah.
athletes, the administration, etc. So this next question is a little bit more specific and a little bit more personal. So you've been there for 7 years. You've been through other programs. You've seen cultures of what Seth put into culture, coach at St. Ben's, things like that. You have your own culture of your mom's influence on you. That's a part of your culture and what you bring to the table. Tell me what do you bring to the culture of Minnesota State? You specifically. You've been there 7 years now, so you've affected it positively and negatively. Like that's
Yeah.
meaning we've made mistakes, but obviously it's the sum total is positive. Tell me about the role you play in that winning culture there at Minnesota State.
Authenticity. I think it's being
Mm,
authentic. I think it's about, I tell my athletes when I recruit you to be here, the culture and some of the things that are here, they're already set in stone. I want you to be yourself. Think about
yeah.
it like you move into a community, you buy a house in a community. Yes, we can talk about social constructs and all these things, but yes, you're going to have neighbors on this side, neighbors on this side that might think certain ways or might look at, but you got to be yourself.
Mhm.
You don't change who you are to fit yourself, and this is what it is, right? And I think with what I've been able to do here, and the one thing that Turgeon has always made apparent to me, it's Brian, be yourself and allow you to be kind of what sets the tone or kind of what sets the wheel rolling. Um, and I think that part of it is something that really pours out to my student athletes, because when they come here, again, the thought process is still the same. I want you to be yourself within this group. And I think that in itself carries us even further. And then when we're talking about, you know, I have a pretty decent international group. They're coming from all different parts of the world. The one connection point is track and field, but the one thing that they can bring and add to the group is, themselves. I have a multi-vendor that I recruited from Iowa, who's never traveled, outside of the country in his life, and this year he's traveling all the way to Norway to hang out with his teammates. Um, and a lot of it is just because I don't know any other way of doing it but being authentic about, you know, whether it's again down, whether it's your marks and what you want to accomplish, whether it's you doing a shitty job in the classroom, just being real about the things that are going to get us where you want to go or get an athlete where they want to go, right?
Yeah, I think a thing to point out there is that trickle down, if you will, that culture being authentic amongst the coaching staff trickles down to the coaches to the athletes as well. And I think if you guys didn't have that on the coaching side, well, it would show pretty quick when you tell an athlete, yeah, just be yourself, and it's like, man, I see you guys. You guys aren't yourself. What do you mean? Like, kids are kids, but they are very perceptive.
Yeah.
They catch on to things that we think that they don't catch on to. And so I think that, and so I have to imagine if I were talking with an administrator at Minnesota State, that some of the same languages that you and Turgeon are using, they're using as well. That this is a trickle down from the athletic administration to the coaches, to the athletes, etc. So I think that's authenticity. That's one of my I call it my buzzword. Like I love, I truly believe in authenticity. It's why I love, the people that we hire here. Almost everybody in the sales and things
Yeah.
like that are former track athletes or track coaches, and they don't have to be good. Like we don't necessarily have to have been amazing. Trust me, I was a terrible athlete. So they don't have to be good athlete, but they have to have passion centered
Yeah.
around that sport and around coaches, and therefore around equipment. And I think that authenticity is extremely, extremely important. So I love that. Uh, Brian, give me here in our as we start to wrap up here a little bit. What's got you excited about the future of Minnesota State? And you get to define future. It could be the 2026 season, it could be the 2036 season. But as you continue to move along as a coaching staff and continue to improve, what's got you excited there?
Well, I'd say my excitement is rooted in Turgeon's vision.
Hmm.
I could say that. I think I remember him sitting with me when he recruited me for this position, and I was telling him jokingly, I was like, "You don't have to recruit me, you have to recruit my wife."
Yeah, yeah.
It was the truth. But I think, remember, he sat down with me. He said, "Brian, you know what? In 5 years, I think it was year three for him. He was like, I want to win a national title here." And I remember in year five, that's 2 years for me here. We won a national title on the women's side, and I think
Wow.
when he puts thought and he is sitting down, and I sit down in his office with meetings all the time with him, just about whatever with scholarship money or this I need. But it's always interesting to hear him and kind of hear what he's thinking, where he's thinking about going next. But I think the excitement is just knowing that when he puts thought into something, he's going to work to make that happen. And then even that, his ability to cultivate a response, cultivate the responses from us in terms of us working to make sure that certain things are happening. Those things excite me because it's one of those things where like I almost liken it to, imagine you had this untrusting friend and they blindfolded you and you had to trust them to lead you somewhere, and you kind of be weary, but you'd be taking these tiny steps. He'd be the one where if he was leading me, I'd be taking these large steps, knowing that, okay, like the end result of this, can't be bad. It's, potentially going to lead us towards what we want to accomplish as a team. And those goals and those tasks, those things that we kind of set up that we want to accomplish, all those things are again well thought of and well planned, and that part of it excites me, because when he says something, there's meaning behind it. It's not just saying it to say it. So I would say from that vantage point, that's the part of it that excites me. Obviously, there's a sweeping change in just collegiate athletics in general, with recruitment and how that's. But I'm always excited about that stuff. Is always going to be exciting to me, where I can take an athlete, whoever's in front of me, I'm coaching, I'm willing to work with them and do the things they need to. So that part of it is never going to change in terms of excitement. Um, I know the athletes that choose to be a part of my program, I'm always vigilant and very self-aware about, whether I have my exit interviews, have discussions with them. We talk. So I try to stay well bonded to them as I realize I'm getting older. I'm not as young as I used to be, and I could like, "Oh, let me get into a workout with you guys and do this little thing here." That's not happening. So I have to find other channels to kind of connect me and keep me connected. But for the most part, one thing I do realize is, you know, the athletes, they have their goals, they're passionate about their goals, they're passionate about what, and they believe in themselves wholeheartedly. I mean, it's that never changes. That stuff never changes. And I think so that for me is that excitement piece for me regarding the athletes, that's never going to leave me. I think that's a part of it from year to year. It's just, recharging the battery and then hitting it up again in the fall when they're here.
I think you gave the most amazing compliment I've ever heard to Mike Turgeon there with the analogy, the story, the example of, the blindfolded friend and like, he's a friend. I don't know how much I trust him. So you take baby steps. And again, because when people tell stories, I'm a visual guy, so I'm always like watching the video in my head. And you were like, yeah, but with Mike, he could blindfold me and I would walk freely. Like I would trust him implicitly, where that has to be like one of the greatest compliments I've ever heard of someone else. And that just continues to back up the culture that you guys have there. Because I remember when I reached out to Mike for him to be on the podcast, and he actually turned me down and said, "Hey, you know who you should have on the show? My assistant, Brian Sebera."
Oh gosh.
Yeah, he goes. He gave me like a quick 2 minute or 2 sentence. Like this guy's been here and, da, 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 and done this, and like he literally was like, "Not me. You should get Brian." And I told him, I was like, "Well, I was like, I want you, Mike. I was like, but I'll put Brian on the list
Oh,
for sure. Like I like referrals or nominate like that. That means a lot. If someone reaches out to me and says, "Hey, you should have so and so on the show," like that means like wow, that person has at least affected one person tremendously positive, right? So, but that not amazed. I can't think of the right word, but it was impactful when Mike was like, "Hey, I appreciate that, but you really should be like my assistant Brian should be
yeah.
on that show." That just showed me like, oh wow, like here's a dude who's lifting up other people, like putting himself in the back seat and putting Brian in the front seat in that example. So, and that actually made me want Mike more. Like that's why I was like, yeah, it's cool. I'll get to Brian, but Mike, like, come on, dude. Anybody
Definitely
who,
want
yeah, I was
Mike.
like, anybody who would do that, like now, Mike, you have to be on the show now because you did
Yeah.
that, dude. So I just, I love the love that you guys, for sure have for each other, and I'm careful at saying, it's like a family and things like that, because in the day, it's still business. You could get fired any day, and he could get fired any day, things like that. But boy, you guys certainly have a strong connection as a staff, and that again, that kind of thing does not spill over to your athletes. So it's pretty evident, along with getting very good athletes and coaching them well, there's a culture that makes them run just a little bit faster, makes them jump a little bit farther, throw a little bit farther. That's pretty evident from the coaching staff. So that's really cool. I love that, Brian.
Thank you.
Well, dude, we are at the end. That is the right place to stop here for the day. I'm so glad Mike did tell me that I needed to have you on the show, and I appreciate, both of us sticking it out. You sticking it out patience wise, and me sticking it out patience wise with track season, things like that. But I always believe that you are exactly where you're supposed to be at this moment. So to be where your feet are. So when things maybe go slower than we want, or it doesn't happen the way we thought we wanted it, I think that's exactly how it played out. And I think you're supposed to be on this show exactly today, not 2 years ago, not 2 years from now. I think this was the right time, and it showed by your story, man. That
Thank
is
you.
amazing. I could have spent the whole time just talking about your childhood and growing up and acclimation. And I think the things that you talked about with assimilation and culture and culture appropriation and keeping true to your original, I think those are extremely important. Like I'm very fascinated by those topics, and they don't necessarily have to do with track and field, although they do have to do with track and field. You coach kids from other countries and other regions and things like that, and you got to kind of now help lead
Yeah.
these young men and young women of like, all right, well, yes, they're different because they came from here, and you know what? Maybe you got to think about how they feel about being in Minnesota for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Like there's a weather-wise and things like that. So I think you're doing an amazing job leading young men and young women. I'm so glad that you're pouring into them, and it's really it's a continuation of the people that poured into you from professionally, people like Seth and Mike, to family like your mom and your dad and brothers and people in your neighborhood in Canada where you grew up, and people that helped you out when you were in Africa, moving from just terrible, terrible situations. I mean, those are all build up to who you are today, and I think that's so cool that kids get to learn from you and experience that from your point of view.
Appreciate that. No, appreciate you giving me this opportunity to share. And hopefully some of this means something to someone and they can take it and make use of it.
Well, it will. There's no doubt in my mind. So thank you so much for you guys being here again today. It means the world to me that you press play, not because you get to hear my voice. You'll hear my voice and all the time on Twitter and podcasts and all that kind of stuff. It's these guys and gals that sit down with us. Their voice, their story, their journeys matter, and I'm super excited to share these with you. With Brian, I didn't know a lot about his. He's one of those guys I've talked to you about, that there's people on the show that I don't really know, that I haven't really talked to much. Brian and I have not talked much on the track and things like that very much. So I didn't know very much about Brian. So to hear that story, that authenticity, that journey that he's gone through, like that. That's amazing to me, that this guy became a track coach. He could, I mean, you heard the story. He could have become a lot of different things. Obviously, a teacher professor is kind of where I think he was bent to go towards. And thank goodness for us in the track and field world, that this guy decided to take that teacher professorship into doing it for track and field in life, helping young people continue to grow. So I'm so happy that you were able to hear his journey. So join us next week. We'll do it all over again and have some more fun out there. Thanks, everybody.